Hello, I graduated in '94 and I came from the Milneck School over in Long Island, and I love NTID. So my presentation is my personal experience here with the local senior citizen housing project. Are you aware that we're celebrating the 45th anniversary? And can you imagine, you see the banner up there, 45th anniversary, and I hope that you're wise and happy enough that, we all are getting older and older. And so it's important that you start planning your future and what you're going to be doing, to be active in your own backyard. Here in Rochester, we have a very large deaf community, thanks to NTID. If it wasn't for NTID, we may be it might have been a ghost town. But you see the picture up here, that's a picture of 3 generations of deaf people in my family. You see my son and my mother. They all look a lot like me. So 3 generations, and now we're on to a 4th generation of deaf people in my family. And my son actually marks the 5th generation of deaf people within my family. We must help ourselves. We can't rely on others to help us. It's all very important to plan for your later stages of life. That way you can help your family prepare for that inevitability. Let me share some information with you for you to think about. My goal is to, hopefully be a call to action and to provide you with some important information. These are just some numbers, the populations. We have over 300 million people in the U.S. And there's a census that's done, on a regular basis to measure the population and know the demographics. And so this is where those numbers come from. And this is how they're broken down. You can see that 3.5% of the total population is either deaf or hard of hearing. Well, 3.5% of those who have difficulty hearing, I should say, that's where the numbers come from. And if you look down to using that 3.5% number of the total population, over 300 million, that's about 11 million people. Now, of that number, about 1% use American Sign Language as their means of communicating. So as we look at the numbers, how many people feel like that number is correct? 100,000, 200,000 members of the population? But in general, we are aging as a population. The baby boomers of the 70s and 60s, today things are different. In 2030, the number of elderly people will double. Oh, that's on my next slide. Okay. So looking at the baby boomers, that's the reason why our population is aging. So the baby boomers are now at a point where, those who were born back then, I'm part of the Generation X group. The next group is going to be sandwich generation, meaning you have to take care of both your children as well as your elderly parents. One out of 8 people are in that sandwich generation. I'm not referring to eating a sandwich, but having to take care of your children, very challenging responsibility, but also taking care of your elderly parents, having both those on your shoulders. And many of you are going through that as well, if you're not, or will be if you're not already. So as I identify the numbers here, the population, there are solutions for them. You know, you think about where our starting point for retirement is. You know, you don't want to be the only people in your community who are elderly. You want to have a nice, quiet place, you know, when you reach the age of 55 or older. And you can still take care of yourself at that age, but you may need some help, you know, washing your clothes, taking care of your house. You may consider living in an independent living center, but then as you age, you need to have further assistance, whether it's a home health aide, you know, going into your 60s and your 70s. Your health is going to be deteriorating. You'll be, you know, needing more medical care, maybe some assistance bathing, making sure that you are still socializing with other individuals, that you don't become isolated. You know, and that's the final phase of life. And there are people who decide that they don't want to live in a nursing home. You know, imagine living in a home and then all of a sudden your family says, it's time for you to move out to the nursing home. Many people are not accepting of that predicament. They want to stay and live in their home until they absolutely need, you know, the nursing home. You know, maybe having nurses come to the house to assist them as they have these needs. And there are different types of nursing care. There's, you know, those who are suffering from Alzheimer's. They need a certain type of care that's typically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's unfortunate, but we do have people who are in that circumstance. Another idea is also having income that will support you in your final stage of life. Low-income housing is often provided by the government, and we're seeing that happening more and more. And, you know, with deaf senior citizens, we're looking at trying to set up a place for them, and I'll talk more about that later. Respite care is also another thing that we're seeing more and more. We're all very familiar with child care, but now there's respite care available. You know, if your caretaker needs some time away to either, you know, go shopping or take care of themselves, there are individuals who can come and provide some care, take care of your parents while you get some time away. Because in caring for one's elderly parents, it is very time-consuming and can be very stressful, and it's important that you get periodic breaks from that responsibility. And so I just identified that we have this large population of senior citizens coming through the baby boomer generation. And we know about the issues that deaf people face. Imagine a deaf person being placed in a nursing home where they are the only deaf patient in that care facility. You know, you can't talk with anyone. You know, you have other peers in the nursing home, but they're all hearing. You're the only deaf person. So for me, this is a real important goal of mine, to set up a senior citizens facility for deaf people. If you look at what's available to deaf people versus what's available to hearing people, deaf people have it much worse off, and we need to change that. You may have seen some housing projects in the news or iDeaf news. You know, we're looking at these projects. What happened was they were built as affordable housing projects. There was a group of investors who supported them. There was one in Arizona, and people who lived there had to be low income, 55 years or older. You know, low income meaning earning less than $30,000. These facilities would cost roughly $900, $1,000 a month, but fortunately they were subsidized and made the cost much more affordable for those members of that community. There is federal money available to support some of these projects, but it comes with a lot of rules and a lot of regulations. What about the ASL Apache project? You know, that was that the right thing to do, to use people's money to benefit individuals? You know, there were cries that that should not have happened, and as a result, people were kicked out of that project, and they became displaced. Imagine people who need tremendous assistance all of a sudden being kicked out of their facilities, you know, and where they had all these amenities that kept them very happy, other people just like them who were deaf. But then they were placed in other areas outside of that, and their health deteriorated at a much faster rate. So this is a big concern. You know, we're trying to work with the government to explain to them what they're doing is extremely hurtful to the community. However, there are rules and regulations. There's a bureaucracy that we are fighting up against. There is hope. We are working with the federal government to have them understand what our goals are. You know, we're hoping to have more of these projects available to members of the elderly deaf community. You know, because it comes to your last phase of life, and you still must have all the benefits of this world instead of being so isolated. I did some work on seeing what was available nationwide, so please, please pay attention to this. If you're in an area that we don't have such facilities, it's time for you to start thinking about it. We can give you some resources on where you can go. The Deaf Senior Citizens of America organization. It's a wonderful resource, a nonprofit organization. They met in Baltimore not too long ago, where they had their conference. And their agenda is to make sure that deaf senior citizens have equal access to housing. You know, whether that means nursing homes or whatever the case might be. So this map shows that we have these projects across the nation. Unfortunately, you can note that Rochester up there does not have such a facility. We are working on constructing a 60-unit facility here in town, and they will be accessible for our deaf senior citizens. Interesting enough, the government here in New York is different than the government in Arizona. The local government sees the need for the deaf senior housing. And so they do have independent living center for hearing people. And they're gonna make a new wing for deaf senior citizens. And they'll be partnering with other agencies who specialize in the care of deaf people and working with nursing homes. So there is collaborative work going on here, and I hope to have Rochester identified as one of these centers real soon. So I hope that this is something for you to think about, and please see me afterwards. I'd like to inspire you to get busy in planning for your future. Thank you.